Delaying student loan repayments has become commonplace in the news as of late. With it, so comes a complete separation of ideas related to student loans, and another issue for Americans to fight over. Today on The Garden, we dive into the hot topic of student loans, and conversely, we will dip our toes into the debate about tipping. Welcome to The Garden. So we're talking a little bit about student loan forgiveness today because it's been taken over the media as of late. They've been talking a lot about extending the moratorium on student payments. They've been talking about getting rid of up to $50,000 in student debt. And a lot of this is bringing about a lot of anger within different groups of people. It's pretty obvious if you look through any of the social media pages, or if you look at any chats on any of the articles that are coming out. Jeff and I, we grew up in a town where college didn't even look like it was even an opportunity for us. We grew up in Aberdeen, Washington, where it was mostly a lumber town. The lumber industry went out in the 1980s because of spotted owl, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was it.
The spotted owl just completely decimated our economy. I grew up in a single parent family, and I believe you did too, correct?
I had a stepdad who was hanging out.
Gotcha. So my father used to work at the shake mills, and he would go out and take these huge contracts, and they would go out and they would dig up big cedar lumber trees that were buried or left behind from these huge companies that would come through and cut down these big clear cuts.
The cedar blocks.
Yeah. He would have to cut them into blocks, and they would put them into cords, and then they would fly them all out. And so when that happened, the spotted owl thing happened. My dad had just sunk all of his savings into his own contracts. And it was everything we had. And I think to this day, I think that was one of the reasons my parents ended up separating. You know, financials always end up affecting people.
Makes it tough.
So college didn't even sound like it was even plausible for me at that point. In 10th grade, I ran into a counselor. I was in 10th grade, and I was struggling with school because there was a lot of drugs around, a lot of alcohol. We were sneaking alcohol into our gym locker, and we would get drunk and go to PE and then go to our classes at the end of the day. I mean, we would be completely tore up. Anyways, college was way in the far off distance for me. I mean, there was no way I could even consider going to college. Mm-hmm. In 10th grade, I dropped out. I went and got my GED, and after talking with a counselor, I found that there was opportunities for me to get grants so that I could go to school. And so I did. I got some grants. I got my LPN, went back to school, got my RN. But by the time I was an LPN, I was making enough money. I didn't qualify for the grants. So here I am, 18 years old, barely an adult, and I'm signing papers on student loans, not knowing what I'm getting into. All I know is I'm trying to improve my life, which I did. So fast forward, I've accumulated quite a bit in student debt as I went back to school. I got my doctorate. Mm-hmm. And it's never been clear, a lot of these repayment terms.
Sure.
In fact, when I was in school, I had the opportunity to do income-based, which I didn't do. And what I decided to do is I was going to do a 10-year repayment program. I signed the papers to do 10-year repayment, and over the next 10 years, I was paying almost $2,000 a month for my student loan, not realizing that I had signed into an interest-only student loan.
Oh, right.
So people get upset. I mean, that was dumb on me. I should have been checking. I wasn't paying attention to my balance. I was more focused on work. I mean, I was putting, almost 100 hours a week into work. I wasn't looking at that stuff. That stuff was coming out of my check automatically. Mm-hmm. I just saw money going towards my student loan. So the student loans that people are signing up for, they're not so clear cut. I mean, people have to go to education and counseling, but I mean, it's really, hopefully it's improved. I mean, this was almost 15, 20 years ago. that I went through these classes on, what the student loan consists of.
Yeah.
So I can understand why we're getting so deep in this student debt.
Right. And you're not making the claim that we need to get rid of all student debt, right? You're agreeing to the responsibility of making those repayments. So the tricky part is, as you mentioned, you're 18 years old. You're not even of legal drinking age, and you're being expected to make decisions that are going to influence the next 20 years of your life.
Even more.
Sure, because your interest only payments, you're not making a payment on the principal. So you still have that to worry about after the first 10 years.
That's right.
So, and asking someone who's so burdened by the workload from the college and just the amount of attention that has to go in so many different areas, you're not going to become an economist in order to figure out exactly what all this student loan paperwork means. You're just going to be signing because you know that you need it in order to finish this.
That's right.
Right. So you're not going to be digging in too deeply.
Well, it's hard to, because it's very confusing.
But when do the lobes develop that help you make long-term consequential decisions? It's like 25 years old before you can really see how your decisions today are going to impact you in the future.
Men aren't as smart as women, I think, in a lot of situations.
You're being asked to make those kinds of decisions about lifelong financials that you just have no concept of.
That's correct. And the other thing is the schools are, we think they're there with the counseling to protect us, but it's actually in the school's best interest to, feed us whatever they need to in order for us to take out these loans. That money goes enrolled. Yeah, the money goes straight to these schools.
Right. And
so why would they give us any information any different than, hey, you can do this, you qualify? And the sad thing is almost anybody can qualify. I was so poor. My mother made like $300-$400 a month, as I was growing up.
Yeah.
How the heck could she qualify? How could I qualify for $100,000+ in loans?
Right. Well, they're banking on the fact that you cannot go bankrupt on it. That's going to be with you until you die if you don't pay it back.
That's correct.
It's going to have major implications on your credit score.
Yep.
And you're right. The schools are not going to. It's like a car dealership trying to talk you out of a car loan. They're not going to do it.
That's right.
They want to do everything they can to sell you the loan because the colleges are making money off of you. They are a corporate entity. They're not. There are some people involved who are there to try to help you along, and they're genuine about that. But for the most part, the school is a corporation.
It is. And they have government entities they're promoting their ideologies. The loan companies have these same people that are promoting to our governors and our Senate and, having them create these laws.
Right. And
so we put ourselves in a position with these student loans that we may never, ever get even half of the student loans paid off. And that's $1.7 trillion is what I last saw. $1.7 trillion in student loans. That's 10% of American GDP.
Yeah.
God knows, it might only be like 2% after we complete all this pandemic spending, but still,
right.
Like it's such a massive amount, and it puts such a burden on American people. Like I completely understand the frustration with student loans.
Right. And so you get to the point, like, we know what the problem is, and no one seems to have a clear answer. Biden was talking about, people were kind of hopeful, and it was the dream that he would be able to alleviate $50,000 in student debt. Last I heard, it had gone to, he might be able to do $10,000 in student debt. That's not really going to touch the problem.
No.
It's not even making a good faith effort. That's politics. That's just saying, look what we've done for you, when really it's not near enough to make a difference.
It's not. For a lot of people, it's not going to. But there's so many different arguments out there from the other side saying, and it's weird. It's these weird arguments coming out. I paid for my student loan. I don't want you to have anything that I didn't get.
Right.
And so this is kind of the mentality that people have out there right now with regard to the student loans. And this is affecting a lot of things that are going on. Yet these same people, they don't blink twice about all of this money going for God knows what else. I mean, I don't drive to half of these states, but my federal tax money is going to repair things in those states. I'm not complaining.
Sure.
Within our own state, there's bridges I've never even been on, but my state tax money goes to pay for these bridges.
Yeah, that's just part of being a part of a community, though.
Sure,
I mean, that's an expectation. But the thing that kind of bothers me the most is the people who say you need to repay 100% of your student loans. Like, this is your burden you took out. And I understand that argument. I wouldn't, there's definitely a conversation to be had here. It's not cut and dry. But for those same people to say, well, if you don't want to work in a minimum wage job, then don't work in a minimum wage job. Okay, so what? I need to go to college in order to get out of this minimum wage job burden. But to go to school, you have to have student debt. You have to have student loans. And
in America.
Right. And, let's not even dip our toe into the socialist discussion where we should have just free college in general. In fact, let's dip our toe in there because
sure.
the out of the top 50 universities who have the largest endowments, in the top 50, it's Rockefeller University has the lowest or the smallest endowment at 1.8 billion. And then you have Stanford, who has 18.7 billion in endowments. And you have University of Texas at 20 billion, Yale at 20 billion. Harvard is the wealthiest according to the endowments, which isn't cash on hand, but it's like a promissory note that allows them to help relieve some of the student burden. It's supposed to help keep tuitions down, but we know that tuitions are going up, right?
Yeah.
And but Harvard has $32 billion.
So those are the top five.
Those aren't the top five. There's another one from, I think, Saudi Arabia that rounds out the top five.
So we're sitting at over $100 billion in these colleges in endowments alone.
Just in the top five.
And I mean, how many students could that pay for?
Countless.
Yeah, let's take that $1.7 trillion and lower everybody's student debt just by that $100 billion. Let's distribute that equally. I mean, there you go.
And that's in the top five.
Yeah, we're close to that $10,000 that we were talking about.
Right.
And that's the top five. You're right.
Right.
And how many colleges are there in the United States? My college is always hitting me up for money. Always.
Sure.
Donate here.
If you didn't have as much student debt to pay, you might be more inclined to give because the alma mater is important to people, right? That sense of community extends beyond the governmental interventions that require your tax dollars to go to bridges you don't drive over. And that feeling of community easily could extend to the university that you attended, if not for the burden of student debt.
Yeah. And, I understand a lot of the reasons that people are not wanting these student debts to be taken care of because there's a lot of degrees out there that people are spending, $100,000 on, these art degrees or things that they can't do anything with, not to offend any of the artists out there, but in reality, there's a lot of degrees out there that just they're not going to pay for what you're going to school for.
And people look down on art degrees. The fact is, if it's a 4-year degree, it's a 4-year degree. That's true. I was working at the prison, and I could have qualified for different jobs, if I'd had an AA. I'd probably still be working there. If I had a bachelor's degree in anything, I could have stepped in, just walked into a different role that was much better than just a corrections officer.
Sure.
And they don't care what your degree is in. They just want you to have a 4-year degree, right? And I know a lot of people with 4-year degrees who are doing the job, some jobs that I look at them and I'm like, and I just think, I wonder how they could possibly have earned that job. That's a 4-year degree.
And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to edit this out, but
no, you take up all the time you want.
To kind of piggyback off of that, there is a saturated market when it comes to employable employees. And it seems like you're going to need a master's degree to work at Starbucks because everyone's got a degree. And moving here to Arizona in a much larger area than I've ever lived, when I was looking for a job, it's almost impossible to find anything, even on Craigslist. people are promoting their stuff on Craigslist. Oh, let me ghostwrite your book. I've got a PhD in this. I've got a PhD, like double masters, whatever. And I'm like, well, I went to community college for a little while. I can write okay, but I'll never be competitive in that market because I don't have the initials by my name that says I paid a bunch of money to go to a school and learn a bunch of things that I could have picked up from the library.
Or on the internet. That's right. Well, the only people that this is going to hurt are going to be the kids, right? Because, I mean, as an employer, who do you want? Do you want somebody with a master's degree? Or do you want somebody with, no degree, right. 17 years old and no work ethic and no work background?
I understand that. And I would be, I don't know. I would hire the right person for the job.
That's right. But a lot of people don't look at that. A lot of these big corporations, they won't look at that necessarily.
Not unless you have the paper.
Yeah. You gotta wow them at first, right? You gotta wow them with your application. You're not going to necessarily wow them until you can actually be in front of them.
Sure.
But you got to get the opportunity to stand in front of these people.
And so I think next time I'm applying for a job, I'm going to put that I went to Harvard or that I went to Yale. I'll just fake it until I get to the interview process and I'll say, yeah, that's all BS. I didn't actually attend, but check me out.
Yeah.
Like, well, let's have a conversation.
Right. You can say I went there and they turned me down, but I was over there.
But I stopped by.
That's all I was saying here. So getting back into the student loans, we can talk about some different things. For example, one of the things that I think is important for us to really consider as a population is there's a lot of service members out there that have large student loans.
Yes.
Doctors, nurses, lawyers, firemen, some of these different people that we need in our, I know you're laughing, but
no, I'm laughing because a fireman, that's to have a degree to be a fireman is like, that's
some of the higher ups have to,
that's
right?
Similar to art school, right?
Sure it is.
You have a degree so you can have a hobby.
So we got to look at some of these service members. We have doctors and nurses and teachers that have to go and get these degrees and they provide a service for our community. Yeah. So next time you're in the hospital or anywhere, look at these people and understand some of these people are burdened by their student loans. And here they are sacrificing themselves to take care of you. They're sacrificing themselves to take care of your children. They're sacrificing themselves to do this stuff, and they've already put in the time in order to get that degree. So should we give them an opportunity to get out of this loan and improve their life? I mean, they're spending their life to improve yours.
Right.
And then what would the answer be if we were able to do this? Do we cut their interest completely to zero and give them an opportunity to pay their loan back that way? It's not fair to the banks, unfortunately, but if the government's even considering this $300, $400, $1 trillion endeavor to reduce student loans, why not do something like cut the interest or pay the interest for these people for the next 10 years so that they can get their student loans paid off?
Right. And one of the issues right now is that we're going through artificial inflation, and they're having to really take a look at interest rates to begin with. Like, I understand both sides. They sign the papers to say they're going to pay back this amount over this amount of time. I think the interest only is shiesty, but it's paperwork that was signed. So just as playing devil's advocate, it's hard to feel bad about someone who's cruising around in a Porsche. Like, I'm sorry you have student debt, but you're still driving around in your Porsche, right? I mean, you're a doctor in a small town and you're driving a 2022 Corvette, and it's difficult. It's just hard to feel sorry for those people.
Well, I'll help you understand this a little bit. Maybe I can. So, I've looked into psychology a little bit, and it was just something that interested me when I was younger. And people that are going through high depression or they feel like all is lost, they start to develop some risque behaviors, right? They decide, oh, I want to go skydiving, or I want to bungee jump, or, whatever, they do things that are risky. Wingsuit, they do this because they lose the desire to live. They're not necessarily suicidal, but they don't want to be around. And if something takes them, whatever. And that becomes a risque behavior. In fact, I just took a personality test not too long ago that had a lot of these type of questions on it. Asking if I would prefer to do one thing over another. And they were assessing me for risque behavior because they were seeing if I had I mean, they're assessing for depression and other things, but that's one of the things that would kind of clue them into that. So now let's take the depression piece out of it. And you have somebody that is a doctor and he's pulling in a lot of money. So you take these people that, they're doctors and attorneys and nurses and teachers, these people that spend a lot of money on their education, and they've given back for 5-10 years, been making these payments, paying 10% of their income, 15% of their income for this long. I think people get to a point where they're just fatigued, exhausted. They're like, the world doesn't care about me, so I don't care about the world.
I think that might be a little bit of a cop out, because
it might be a cop out, but it's what happens. I mean, I have friends that they swear they're going to die with their student loans because they're so frustrated with their student loans that they sign for it.
Sure.
But again, by the time you're educated enough to know what you signed for, you're already $20,000, $30,000 in debt.
Right. These are, for the most part, I think these can be seen as predatory loans. And when I say it's hard to feel bad for somebody who's cruising around in a Porsche, it's, yes, they're pulling in a lot of money. They're spending a lot of money on a lot of different things. They have this burden of student debt. And I'm saying this as someone who, my wife is going to medical school right now, and she's going to graduate in September. And she was fortunate enough to get some scholarships that really helped us out. And so they put a cap on how much we could borrow because they don't want us to exit with a lot of student debt. So they're really putting a cap on this. And, things are a struggle right now for us because they won't allow us to take out much student debt, even though we can afford it. Both of our credit, we have good credit. But after she graduates, she needs a new car, or she needs a different car at least. And I'm sure it'll be nice. We're gonna elevate our status from the 2-bedroom apartment that we're in right now into a larger house. And I wouldn't ask anybody to pay off her student debt because we knew going in that we were going to be responsible for it. That being said, I'm in my 40s, she's in her 30s, so we do comprehend those long-term consequences. So I don't think we should not give some relief. Double negative. I do think we should give some relief for the student debt. This is a crisis. It is predatory. I'm just kind of speaking from a devil's advocate point of view.
Sure.
I can see both sides, and it's so difficult.
And I can too, as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the problems that we need, how do you address it? I mean, one of the problems that is really a serious problem is we need to address the educational institutions.
Yes.
There is absolutely no reason that our cost of living has went up by 10 to 15% over a certain amount of time, yet school tuition has went up 100%.
Right.
I was looking at a Forbes article magazine not too long ago, and it had a chart. It was showing that your early income from starting work hasn't changed. And they're basing this on percentages. So minimum wage when I was a kid, I believe was $5.75, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And federal minimum wage. I believe it's 7.25 now. I'm not sure if it ever went up. I know they're trying to push it to the 15, but regardless, they're saying that the early intro into your early job is basically minimum wage, and that hasn't changed. Right. Like it's been pretty much consistent. Minimum wage has went up approximately 15%. This is all since 1987. Private universities have went up as much as 150 to 200%. And so has public universities have went up almost the same amount, 150%. Yet minimum wage has only went up like 10%. Cost of living, these schools are far outpacing cost of living, and it's making it impossible for people to go to school to better themselves. We could stop taking out student loans and sending our kids to school, but our country is already falling behind in a lot of things. We outsource so much of what we do, and all we need to do is stop educating people, and we're going to continue to fall faster and faster.
And you look at the starting wages for people who have degrees, and my daughter she's 11 years old right now. She was talking about how she wants to be a herpetologist, and she's going to buy this nice house, and she's going to buy this nice car. And she wants to live alone for a little while before she meets someone. Like, she's got her whole life planned out basically. And I had to break the news to her that a herpetologist only makes $34,000 a year to start. And you're basically working poor at that point. A specialist with a master's degree making you would, at $15 an hour, you'd be making the same as someone who is working a fast food job, which is not disparaging the fast food workers, because they deserve a living wage too. If a job is worth doing, it's worth earning for doing it.
You're right.
Right. But you look at the student debt crisis, and how much student debt is it going to take for her to get a master's degree to go to work for a $34,000 a year job?
We're running into a place where we really got to consider. I'm by far not a socialist. You know that.
Yeah.
I don't agree with a lot of that stuff, but there's certain things in our society that I think are important that we really, really start to consider maybe touching on that a little bit.
I think
education is a big deal.
I think you're edging towards socialism.
No, I really am not. I mean,
that's my goal, is to at least get you over a little bit.
I know, but I mean, here's the deal. And I look at things a little bit, and, growing up poor, I realized that I've been blessed with a lot of opportunities. And unfortunately, there's big corporations that take advantage of people like me in order for me to have those opportunities. But that's everywhere in life. Sure. And I get that.
Sure.
The problem is if we don't have a little bit of socialism in our education system, and we do right now with our Pell Grants and whatnot, but we end up in a situation where we have some very, very smart people that never take a chance at school. Jeff, you're amazing with music, photography, anything that has to do with anything sound. And you're not in a place where you can go to school to make it feasible for you to, enhance these abilities that you have. Like, you have to learn everything on the computer or at the library in order to kind of figure these things out. That's not right. You're somebody that would explode. I mean, there's no telling where your ceiling is. The problem is we'll never know, because it's not feasible for you to go to school for that, because there's no money there for you.
Right. And that's right now. I do plan to go back to school. And when I met my wife, I was going back to college to be a high school English teacher. I've always wanted to be an educator, but my OCD was preventing me from doing that because of some things that I have anxiety about. And I was at a point in my life where I was finally doing it, and I was excelling at school. I was on the dean's list. I was doing very well academically. And, my wife needed to go to school, and I needed to be home with the kids to help take care of them. And, that plus work, plus we own a fourplex I was working on. It's like, it's impossible, it feels like, to get back to college. I know I could do it from home. I am not neurotypical. I'm neurodivergent. I've got ADHD that prevents me from doing schoolwork on my own terms. If I'm sitting in a classroom, that's a different story. So I do plan to get back to college.
Yeah, but here's the problem. You're mid to upper 40s now.
I am 46.
By the time you get done with college, you're going to be in your 50s. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to be age discrimination here, so don't come at me.
I was just about to.
Yeah. But the problem with that is, now you go back to school, you end up with a $30,000, $40,000 loan.
For an art degree.
Right. And you're 50 years old. I mean, how much longer are you going to be able to work? Maybe 20 years if you're lucky, maybe 30. And is that enough time to pay your loan back? I mean, it could be. I mean, granted, you have a spouse that you guys can work off each other. So that's a blessing. But this is something that you could have tackled had we had some sort of a socialist type education system.
That's absolutely true. And I didn't even know about FAFSA when I went to school the first couple years. Yeah. Because, I was mostly taking music classes, but I didn't know about FAFSA. So I was paying everything out of pocket. It wasn't until I was 35. Actually, it wasn't until I was 40 that I realized that FAFSA even existed that I could apply for. I knew that I could apply for student loans, but I didn't know about the grants.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the FAFSA will cover your student loans and your grants, but you're right. You would have probably qualified.
You're right.
You probably would qualify right now.
I do. And that's how I plan to go back
The problem is once your wife starts working,
then I don't.
Now you don't.
That's just the way it is. I understand that.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the way it goes for sure. I mean, we just have to figure out something. And I think the biggest thing we need to do is we need some people up there in office that are going to look at it and say, look, these education systems are definitely a problem. We need to fix that. I don't have a problem with people having or being forced to pay for an education, but the cost of education is out of hand. I have an 11-year-old child. How old is yours?
11.
How old's your youngest?
4.
4 years old. At 4 years old, at this rate, in order for him to go to a 4-year college, university, it's going to cost him as much as it costs to buy a house. So essentially, he's going to have to pay for 2 houses just to get a 4-year education. And that's not fair to these kids. That's not fair that we'll do that to our own kids.
Right.
When I was his age, 4-year university would have cost about $36,000.
Yeah.
Right around there. Houses, you probably in Aberdeen, we probably could have got one for like $59,000. So I guess that's not much different.
My parents got theirs for $36,000.
Yeah. I mean, so it's not much difference there, I guess. But we also had money to buy food. We could pay for our electric bills and everything else.
Right.
We're at a point where our wages haven't changed much. I mean, a little bit, but I mean, our houses are taking up so much of our income now. It's creating problems. I mean, how are our kids going to be able to afford college? They're not. And it's going to make our whole society dumber.
It is. And my 4-year-old wants to be a marine biologist. He loves the ocean.
Oh, Arizona's a perfect place for him.
Exactly. We'll be leaving here as soon as possible. But he's going to start off at the same like $35,000 a year if he eventually does become a marine biologist.
Yeah, we have to have people figure this out for us. And that doesn't mean get rid of student loans. Like I said, there's got to be something. And relief, I don't know what to do. Like I understand it's frustrating to give up, taxpayer dollars. But at the end of the day, taxpayers need to look at things. They need to look at things in a really big picture. We give hundreds of billions of dollars to other countries every single year. They just talked about Ukraine. We gave them like $170 billion for this war.
Sure.
That has nothing to do with us, but we're giving $170 billion. I know we're involved with over 170 different countries in the world. God knows how much money we're giving to all these countries. But all that money alone could be taking care of people back here. But I understand we're a world leader. We have to have our hands into a lot of these.
We say we're a world leader. Based on GDP, we feel like a world leader. But who's doing all of our manufacturing? And I am going to push back on the Ukraine doesn't involve us. It does absolutely directly involve us because of
wheat and oil and stuff.
I'm not just talking about their resources that we need to protect, but NATO, just protecting like the bordering countries. They need to stop them in Ukraine so they don't spill over into Poland and other neighboring countries, right? This is our investment in Ukraine right now is in prevention of World War III. So it does directly involve us, in my opinion. But I forget where we were going with the other.
Well, NATO, Ukraine's not part of NATO.
No, they're not.
So, and I understand
they're surrounded
Poland
by NATO countries.
Yeah, and I get that. And it's actually pulling other countries into NATO because of this whole incident that's going on. And I understand that. Yeah. But I'm just talking like really
financially in the short term, myopically looking at it, it doesn't seem to involve us.
Yeah, exactly. But I understand it does because we've involved ourselves into so much stuff that it opens up the door for so many other countries to go after other countries if we're not involved in some way. I mean, I get all of that stuff, but you're right. From a financial point of view, we need to take care of our people here. But instead, we're going to drive our people into poverty while we're throwing stuff at other people. And that's pretty anti-Christian of me, and I get that. And I am a Christian. And so I mean, there's a little bit of guilt with that, I guess.
Well, I would welcome you to the dark side.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, we have to really look at some of this stuff that we're doing to ourselves. And we give up so much money. And here's the other thing. People complain about the student loans, yet look at our Democratic and Republican parties. How much money are these people donating to these candidates freely? They're just giving money to these people to make laws that none of us like. People are angry right now with everything that's going on. I don't care if you're on the left or the right. The polls are showing like 30% acceptance for our president right now. God knows where that 30% is even coming from.
It would be different if we were an actual democracy, but we're not. We're a democratic republic. So we just have to vote in people who we get two choices. We hope we pick the one who falls closest to what our ideologies are. And we hope for the best. It's a broken system all around.
It is.
And this would all be so much easier if college was free.
That's right.
Like is done in many countries.
That's right. Well, we could go in circles about this all day.
And I'm not even talking about Venezuela.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about socialism and how to offer free college, but the problem is people see that and they recoil immediately because no one is interested in giving up something. It seems like most people don't want to give any ground when they've had to fight for the ground themselves in the past, right?
That's correct.
If I didn't get a break on my student debt, why should you get a break on your student debt?
Yeah, I see that all the time. That's one of the top arguments that people have.
Sure.
But here's the same people. I borrowed money for my house. You're not paying off my house. But here's the thing. You can't pay for your house. You can go claim bankruptcy, and in a couple of years, you can buy another house.
Right.
You don't have to wait that 7 years. I mean, you can.
But that's just avoiding responsibility.
That's
right?
avoiding responsibility. Yet, who's going to pay for that bankruptcy? And you can say, well, I wasn't the one that claimed bankruptcy, but the reality is, there's lots of people out there that do go bankrupt.
Right.
There's lots of people that stop paying on something and they owe debt. And these same people will be like, I'm not touching that student loan stuff. My tax dollars shouldn't go. The reality is we should be helping one another regardless. We have people suffering. We want to help these people that are suffering.
Programs and relief are in place to be taken advantage of.
That's right.
Just like you were talking about the tipping system and how, like your general outlook on tipping and giving above and beyond what's required. And I know you do, though a lot of times it seems like you're hesitant.
I'm not really hesitant on tipping a lot of times. A lot of times I feel kind of gross with tipping.
How do you mean?
Like you have somebody come up and, for example, we went to the Olive Garden probably about a month and a half ago, and there's a line of people outside, and we walk up, and I don't know how, but they brought us straight back. And we're like, this is amazing. We felt like celebrities, right?
Yeah.
We just got taken straight back to our table. We sit at our table. We sat there an hour and a half before we got served.
Ouch.
So, I mean, we would have been better off waiting outside and then coming in. Yeah. But we sat there for almost an hour and a half. We ate our food and we leave our tip. But at the end of the day, I leave a tip and I'm like, why the hell am I leaving this tip? Like the guy didn't earn it. I never even got my water filled up, but I had this pressure from society that I have to tip these people because these people are making under minimum wage. These people are going to be taxed on the tip, whether they get the tip or not. Right. And so I have this obligation, and sometimes it makes me feel dirty to tip these people because they don't deserve that money. And it's funny because we're kind of transitioning from the student loans now. And it's funny because I'm telling people, like, my opinion is we have to find relief for some of these people that are out there. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not giving the money or forgiving their debt or whatever. There has to be some sort of relief for these people. But on the other side, now here I'm saying we need to revisit tipping too at the same time, because I mean, I don't work in the service industry. I have worked in a service industry, but I've never worked in a restaurant or bartender type position. So it's hard for me to have an opinion on this, but at the same time, I cannot stand tipping people sometimes, yet I do because I'm forced to.
Okay, so society is not sitting over your shoulder watching everything you do. So if you don't want to tip, don't tip.
Yep.
If you don't feel like it's earned. I don't typically eat out unless I can afford the tip also. Like I'm planned for that as a part of the meal. And so I like to be a generous tipper, and I tip as much as I can. If the service is terrible, I don't know. There are times when I will tip less, but I will always tip, and I will always feel okay with that.
And I almost feel bad just talking about the tipping portion of this show because I know I'm being judged right now. I know there's people out there that are pissed off just because we brought up tip.
Well, it's to speak on your behalf. It's like you want a tip, earn it. You want the extra money, earn it. Don't leave me sitting around for an hour and a half. Don't come back and fill my water. It sounds like they were slammed. They were super busy. They're probably having a hard time hiring people to fill those positions because they don't pay well enough to put up with the hassle of working there. Like, the job market is really strange right now. And I'm sure they were shorthanded.
Well, I mean, who knows? Who knows?
But
who
that's
knows
not your
what
problem.
Exactly. I go there to eat and I'm trying to be your patron. But it's funny, on the other side of this, we went to a different restaurant a couple of months ago, and I don't want to bring anybody's name into it, or even any association, so we know.
Mm-hmm.
But we went and we had this meal, and it was an amazing meal. We had great service. And the person we were with was a bit older, and I went ahead and paid for the meal and told them, go ahead and leave the tip. They put a $5 bill on the table.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed. So when I got up, I started to walk out, ran back to the table, and I threw a bunch of more money on the table because I was embarrassed by it.
Sure.
So I shouldn't have to feel that way, but I do, because it's so entrenched into our society. But at the same time, I don't know. It's such a weird thing with the tipping, because I remember growing up, customary temp was around 10%, right? They would say whatever taxes are, just leave that same amount as the tip. That's where I was growing up.
Yeah.
Since then, it slowly went up to 12%, and then it went to 15%, and now I think customary tip is 18 to 20% is customary.
Double the tax.
It's double the tax.
Yeah.
So that's where customary tip is. I was looking at an article the other day about tipping, and it's really funny. There's a lot of countries that it's an insult to tip. There is countries that only accept like a 2 to 4% tip. There's countries that, anywhere from, I think Canada is like 12% to 15%. I think they're just below us. I can't remember where the article was that I found. I'll have to look it up. But I look at that, and then I look at like the cruise industry. I like to cruise. Yeah. So I look at the cruise industry, and I was buying a dining package from the cruise industry, and they automatically slap this 18% gratuity on top.
Jeez.
So people are starting to learn who we are as Americans, and they expect a lot more from Americans at this point. Yeah. Even these countries where it was an insult to tip are like, hey, I got my hands out now. When I went to Mexico years ago, you could go get almost anything in Mexico. They would tell you, oh, $20. And then you would be, I'll give you $2. Okay, we take $2. Now, no, they're like $20. No, this is $20. It's hard to negotiate with them because they know we're Americans, and they know that we just give our money away.
Well, there's also a value for the product, and they're understanding the value for the product. But I do think it's to go back on what you were talking about earlier about how stale the minimum wage is and how it hasn't gone up in relation to education, the cost of education. But you have the opportunity anytime you go out to eat where it's socially acceptable to raise that person's minimum wage for that hour they were waiting on you, and you don't want to do it, or you're hesitant to do it, especially if there's not good service.
If there's not good service, I mean, if there's good service, I have no problem at all.
So in a minimum wage, if we go to the person working at McDonald's and you feel like they're not doing a good enough job, do you think they should have a pay cut for that hour?
No. And I understand that. I mean, completely different types of jobs. I totally understand that. That's not a tipping job.
I know this is a sensitive topic for you. Like you're a stand-up dude for kind of grinning and bearing this because you're not in a popular position right now.
Sure.
But I still can't.
But you got to understand, like, I don't have an aversion to tipping. Like, I don't at all.
It's just if you feel like they haven't earned it.
If they haven't earned it.
If you feel like they haven't earned it.
It eats at me to leave
if you feel
something behind. Exactly.
If you feel that way.
Exactly. And a lot of times people will be like, it's the cook's fault. Or, they'll try to blame it on different things.
Maybe it was.
And maybe it was. But when you go out, you should expect a certain type of service, right? And what makes it worse for me, Jeff, is, have you ever been on a cruise?
No.
So my wife and I got married on a cruise. We were on an Alaskan cruise. They set us up in an independent little area table. They brought us out king crab legs. They would put butter on our table. We would dip our crab leg in. Somebody would run out and replace our butter. Like it never had any like congealing look to it at all. Like it was constantly warm, fresh butter.
Yeah.
This service was phenomenal. Every time I've been on a cruise, we get service very similar to that. So then you come back to America. Actually, this is really funny. I'm going to tell you this story too. We went on a Norwegian cruise, and it was a Hawaiian cruise. And I remember walking into the buffet area for breakfast, and this guy just started screaming at one of his employees. Like one of the employees started just screaming at another one because there was no Frosted Flakes out. So this was an employee screaming at another employee.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is going on? This isn't typical. So I started paying attention, and the staff was just incredibly rude, just rude everywhere you go. And so I went up and started talking to one of the employees that I had kind of made a friendship with. And that employee told me the only way you could work on this specific cruise, because it was in Hawaii and because it never left American waters, they had to either have a green card or be American in order to work here. It was the rudest cruise I've ever been on. I've never been back on a Norwegian because of this.
Wow.
We are just, the Americans have this sense of entitlement, and this sense of entitlement just completely like destroys so much with service. I have friends that work in the service industry, and they tell me they know who's going to tip and who's not going to tip. They can tell. And a lot of times they will treat the people,
poorly.
Well, not necessarily poorly. They treat people how they think that these people are going to tip, right?
So they have a preconceived idea of what they think the person's going to be like.
They do.
And then they treat them based on how much of a tip they feel like they're going to get.
Exactly. And that also affects my feelings about tipping.
So that breeds poor customer service and the self-fulfilling prophecy of not receiving a large tip.
It does, but that's what affects me with regard to tipping as well. That's what I'm saying. Like the whole tipping industry is such a messed up situation. Like I was looking it up last night about tipping and where tipping came from. And tipping's been around for a long time. It actually started in Europe for some reason. But one of the ideologies of why tipping is here in America is it was a way when slavery was abolished. Tipping is a way to pay the slaves a poor wage, so they wouldn't have to put them on their payroll. That's where tipping came from originally in the States, according to this article. And I found several other articles that confirm that as well. I don't know why tipping has gotten to be where it is and why the restaurant industry took it the way it is. I mean, it's not like it protects the value of food or the food that we're getting. I mean, I can't imagine it does.
Right. I would be just as happy to get rid of tipping altogether if they would just raise the wages.
Absolutely.
But they're not going to. You're taking the burden of some of the corporate dollar by tipping yourself, right? Because you're right. They are taxed on the tip, whether they get it or not. If they claim tips that are too low, the government's not going to believe them.
Exactly.
They're going to force them to pay regardless. So if we could get rid of tipping, I think that would be ideal. At the same time, there are going to be places where your customer service is going to suffer. You don't go to McDonald's because you want the perfect service. You go to McDonald's because you know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm the bad guy here, because you're the one that just said, get rid of tipping. That wasn't me.
Oh yeah. Get rid of tipping if you can raise the wages. And that's going to unload the burden of the customer to make up that difference. It's
funny. I like to go into the tipping articles and read the comments. They crack me up. I mean, they're some of the best fights and best arguments, but it comes down to like, I still believe that tipping should be proportionate to the type of service you get. I mean, sure. That's what it should be.
Yeah, I believe that too, to a point.
Sure.
It's not like I'm going to, if somebody cusses me out and is extremely rude, I'm not going to tip.
Yeah. Or if they just don't fill your water up. I mean, I go there for the experience. I mean, if I didn't want my water filled up,
you go to Olive Garden for the experience of.
Well, I mean, I went to Olive Garden because I like
authentic Italian cuisine.
No, they have their fettuccine sauce or Alfredo sauce. Sorry, they have their Alfredo sauce that you can buy in a boat and dip your little breadsticks in. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
So did they bring you that?
Well, that's all I had in salad. So it probably looked like a poor tip anyway. So that's probably why it took an hour and a half, because that's all we ate. But
they're like, these people aren't tipping.
Yeah, they're spending $8 on me.
Right.
No, but I mean, still, it's just, that's why we go there. If you haven't tried it, I would totally recommend it. It's amazing. But
sounds like diarrhea in a bucket.
It looks like it. Alrighty.
Thanks for being a good sport.
Yeah, no worries. Unless you got some more you want to hang out.
I don't. I just wanted to torture you that little bit
perfect.
at the end there.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a good one, and we'll see you next time.